So, for our first module, we're going to begin to explore your understanding of general anthropology, and the subfields and their relationship to each other through Franz Boas, a very important founder of anthropology, and sort of how he defined anthropology early in the 20th century. You may have had some exposure to the thought of Franz Boas, let's say in a history of anthropological thought class, in a theory class. You may have come upon his name in your own readings. You will see in the module, right, we have a documentary, Shackles of Tradition, that give you some background on the anthropologist Franz Boas and sort of his ideal of anthropology, beyond the study of humanity. A study of humanity that's a means to think critically about being human and to achieve knowledge, public policy that serves everyone and is grounded in the best empirical understanding of human beings. The text that you have posted in this module is sort of your required reading, Anthropology and Modern Life. He really puts out this argument for his vision of what anthropology is. And Boas argued that many problems that humans face can be overcome through a better understanding of human society's past and present. And so if you think about Franz Boas, it's a figure in the history of anthropology. It's very useful for us to regroup now that you're preparing for graduation to kind of think about how you understand anthropology in big and broad terms. So think about Franz Boas and who he was. Jewish scholar from Germany who immigrated to the United States and had a really big interest in both, on the one hand, biology, and then on the other, culture. That is the kind of ground of the four fields today, is his interest in biology and culture and their interconnections. He goes on to found the very first department of anthropology and observes that modern change, kind of modernity, the last several centuries, was rapid, and many emerging popular explanations for what was happening in society were often problematic, and race was one of the big ones. So when Franz Boas is establishing the first anthropology department, you have a lot of use of race in explaining problems such as criminology. And Boas, beyond advocating for an anthropology as a study of humanity generally, he was really arguing for anthropology as a study of humanity that can be applied to such kinds of problems. He had a lot of interest in things like advocacy, public education. He had worked with museums for a long period of time, and policy. And he wrote responses to policy-related issues throughout the majority of his life. Think about Franz Boas in terms of establishing the very first anthropology department in American anthropology terms at Columbia University. If we think about what Franz Boas represents to us, he really does represent the founding of our field. And our founding of our field has this particular kind of definition of what anthropology is to it. If we think back, very, very small, starts with 3 faculty members. You have people teaching ethnography, which at that time was primarily in North America and then in the Pacific region. There were faculty and courses that taught about North American languages. You have what was the traditional physical anthropologist, and they drew on expertise within Greek and Latin as well as architecture to teach archaeology. And it was these core faculty, the 3 that actually were in the Department of Anthropology and that archaeologists on the outside. It was that really that led to the first students that were trained in a four-field anthropology. The four-field anthropology being this kind of broad approach to understanding humanity and trying to ground things like policy, issues related to social change and development in concrete empirical kind of study. So Anthropology in Modern Life, it's a very, very interesting book, and I think increasingly through time, anthropologists are turning to it as a sort of quintessential early statement in our career about what anthropology is and what anthropology should be. Whereas there was some, I think, notions in our society, and there are those notions today, that anthropology is simply a field of curiosities. It's a field of exotica. It is a book that really does state in the plainest and simplest language that rather than a study of exotica, it is a way for us to understand the problems that we face as humans. That all of the big issues, nationalism, criminality, race, and so on, really can only be understood through a broad understanding of humanity. Through time, through geographical space, that if you were going to make policies to serve a population, to serve a society, the very best policies would be grounded on a kind of anthropological understanding of humanity. So a kind of conclusion here. Why Franz Boas? Well, Franz Boas offers us an opportunity to reflect upon what our field is, how we understand our field, how we understand the subfields, why we have four subfields, and what a kind of anthropological vision is. He was a founder who envisioned the academic discipline and the scientific practice, but he was also an active public educator and teacher. He was an advocate for using knowledge of humanity in policymaking and social progress.